Education. Well, what is education? Education is a transfer of knowledge, morals, and attitudes from one person to another, and usually from one generation to the next. In the biblical times, education did not follow the pattern with which we are now familiar. For the Hebrews, the goal of education was to prepare man to know God and to live peacefully among men. You may be able to find that in Luke 2:52. Education did not emphasize the three R's. The method of education was different. 2. Although by New Testament times it had changed significantly. In the Old Testament period, education was rather informal. Children were taught in the homes by the parents, not in a formal classroom by a teacher. However, the New Testament times schools had been established to assist parents in the teaching of their children. God gave the responsibility to teaching to parents, Deuteronomy 11 verse 19. To be a parent meant to teach. Both parents were involved in the child's education. However, the father was responsible to see that his children were properly educated. Proverbs 1 verse 8 to 9. A young son stayed with his mother when the father went to the field to work. Therefore, a boy's first significant instruction came from his mother. As the boy grew, the father's involvement in his son, the boy grew. The father's involvement in the son's education increased, especially as they began to work together in the fields or in the father's trade. A daughter stayed on with her mother and continued under her instruction. In the close-knit family structure of the day, as parents became grandparents, they also became involved in teaching their grandchildren. Deuteronomy 4 verse 9 and 2 Timothy 1 verse 5, 3 verse 14 to 15. A parent's responsibility for instructing children continued until death. The term father was applied to teach outside the family also. The teacher often called their students sons. God made Joseph a father to the Pharaoh, Genesis 45 verse 8, which means that the Pharaoh listened to Joseph as a pupil listens to his teacher and receives instruction from him. Throughout Proverbs, the term my son indicates the same teacher-pupil relationship. Proverbs 1 verse 8, verse 10, 15, Proverbs 2 verse 1, Proverbs 3 verse 1, and verse 11. And in the New Testament, Paul spoke of Timothy as his son, 1 Timothy 1:18. During the period between the Old and the New Testaments, synagogues and schools were established, generally by a rabbi taught in a village school supported by the parents of the children who attended. The teacher or rabbi of the school helped the parents by instilling religious truths in the boys' minds. However, the parents still were responsible for the children's education. In choosing a rabbi as a village teacher, the parents were more concerned with the personal character than with his ability to teach. His example was more important than his teaching skills. The ideal rabbi was a married man who also was industrious and serious. He would never joke with the boys, nor would he tolerate any wrongdoing. However, it was considered important that he be a patient man. Both rabbi and parents took God as their model for proper teaching. God was the master teacher, Isaiah 30 verse 20 to 21, who taught by the word and example, Psalms 78 verse 1 and Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 to 3. Every father was expected to teach his son a trade. A Jewish proverb reads, "He who does not teach his son a useful trade teaches him to be a thief." Usually a son followed in his father's occupation, with the father passing on the skills and trade secrets. Scholars do not agree on how many Israelites could read and write in Old Testament times. By the New Testament period, however, almost every village had its own school where reading and writing were taught to the boys. Parents sent their sons to school for the purpose of learning to read the scriptures. They continued in school from the age of 6 or 7 until about 12 years of age. If the parents wanted their son to receive more training, he was sent to Jerusalem, where a number of notable rabbis had schools. Young Paul, Saul of Tyrus, spent time there studying under Gamaliel, Acts 22 verse 3. School was in session year-round, with the day beginning shortly after sunrise and continuing until about 10 a.m. On a hot day, the students would be dismissed for the remainder of the day. If the weather was more comfortable, classes reconvened about 3 p.m. for several more hours of study. The schools consisted of one classroom. All the students studied together. The teacher sat on a low platform, Luke 4 verse 20. The students sat at his feet, Acts 22 verse 3. Because the students were at different learning levels, the instructions had to be individualized. While the rabbi worked with one student or a group, the other busied themselves with assignments. Because the rabbi believed that if the student did not voice his lessons, they would be forgotten, students spoke out loud as they read and memorized. Here is a brief description about education and what it involved and what it meant to Hebrew children, and maybe some of these topics and principles and applications we can apply to ourselves and our society, our culture, our people, to better the future of our children, because children are the future. If you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel, David Charles TV. Do all the YouTubey stuff and enjoy your day.